Hello everyone, today I'm here to show you how to mimic pre-1.9 mob health bars. As you may know, mob health bars were extremely easy to make before 1.9. We did this by using the health tag, which was a short data type at the time. This means that the value was an integer which ranged between 0 and 10. As of 1.6, a tag named healF was added, which handled entity health in a similar way but used float values. This means that as of 1.6, the health tag was technically depreciated for its use. Upon 1.9, the healF tag was removed and the health tag was then converted to use float values instead of integers. This change came with pros and cons. The change meant more accurate tracking of entity health. This also means that we as a community could not use the health tag as a viable option for tracking entity health. This has caused many people to ask how I do the health bars in many of my teaser videos. The health tag can now range between values such as 1.0 or 1.032956, etc., because it now uses float values instead of whole integers. This poses a very obvious problem for map makers and command block engineers. There is, however, a way to mimic the old health tag in post 1.9, to an extent. It's not a perfect system and has obvious flaws and shortcomings. So how is it done? First, let's think about how damage is done and tracked. Obviously, the first thing that comes to many minds is the health scoreboard criteria. This works well and good for players, but not on their entities. Only players are tracked on scoreboards that automatically update, such as health and armor. Using a bit of logic, however, we can still track these values on other entities. Firstly, you will need a total of 6 scoreboard objectives, which I have listed here on the screen. We use these in all of our logic. The first step in our logic is to track which entity has taken damage. We can use the NBT tag hurtTime to do this. We give the entity a scoreboard tag based on their hurtTime NBT, like so. The next step is to find out how much damage was done to the entity. To do this, we make use of the damageDealt scoreboard that we created earlier. Using this command, we can take the value from damageDealt and add it to the entity's damageTaken score to be used later. We now no longer need the player after this, so we can reset their score, and we also no longer need to track the hurtTime, so we can remove that from the entity as well. Now we execute at the entity to subtract the value in its damageTaken score from its currentHealth score. I will get more into what currentHealth, maxHealth, and % do at the end. We can now reset the damageTaken score as we are about to run further calculations, but we no longer need it. Now we tag each entity who has a positive, non-zero value in currentHealth so that we can run all of the health calculations. Firstly, we set the entity's % score equal to its currentHealth score. We then multiply this value by 100 using one of the scoreboards we created earlier and divide the result by the entity's max health value. So what exactly have we done here? In simple terms, we have tracked the damage done to an entity and then calculated the entity's remaining health and converted it into a %, which will range between 0 and 100. We then store this value on the entity itself so it can be tracked. Now that we have the calculation set up on a clock, how do we begin tracking the entities? By default, no entities are being tracked here. We must first give the entity we want to track a value in both maxHealth and currentHealth. We do this by taking the entity's health value in its NBT and multiplying it by 10. For example, a zombie has a default health value of 20. We multiply this by 10, which makes it 200, and then set this as the max health value. Obviously, since the zombie is just spawned in, it does not have any current health values. We then set it to 200 as well, since it has max health by default. The zombie will now have a value of 100 in its % score. Now that the entity has a % stored onto it, you can do whatever you want with this. This can be things such as health bars or events based on entity health. For example, a zombie could get a speed increase if it has less than half of its health. This method has some clear pros and cons. A pro to using this method is that the entity now has a easy to work with % value that can range between 0 and 100. This also gives you a lot of control over what you can do with the entity's health. However, this method cannot track damage done to the entity by any means besides direct player attack. This means damage done to the entity by fire, fall damage, and bows, just to name a few, are not tracked, which could lead to inconsistent values. You also must set each entity's max health and current health scores when each one is spawned, and it generally takes up a lot of command blocks. Let me know what you guys think about this method in the comments below, and let me know if you guys know of any other methods to tracking entity health in post 1.9. I would love to hear them.